Middle schoolers are full of energy, questions, and chaos, but they're also at one of the most pivotal moments in their faith journey. So, how can we better connect with them and create a ministry that truly meets them where they are? My guest today has dedicated her life and ministry to helping churches do just that. On this episode of Student Ministry Connection, we're talking all things middle school with Ashley Bohinc and exploring how Make It Middle School can transform the way you reach and disciple students. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection, a podcast for those who serve in student ministry, but also have a desire to connect with others and grow as disciples and leaders. My name is Steve Cullum, and when I started serving in student ministry, I began helping with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and a few things stood out to me. First, they were kind of overwhelming, and second, I didn't really know what I was doing. But I knew I loved connecting with them and trying to help them understand their faith. And over the years, I realized something else about middle schoolers. Many of them don't feel comfortable in church. And I think it's because a lot of churches don't know what to do with middle school. We struggle to connect with them, and we don't really know how to engage with them on their level. That's why I'm so excited to welcome back my friend Ashley Bohinc to the podcast. Ashley has served in student ministry for a while, both in the local church, but also as the head of XP3 middle school curriculum. She wrote a book called Communicating to Middle Schoolers that you can learn more about on episode 88. And she recently started a brand new ministry called Make It Middle School, which we're going to discuss today, along with her story and why she is so passionate about middle schoolers. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for being back on the podcast.
It's been a minute. It's so good to be back.
The good thing is that, it's not been several years since we've talked. We get a chance to chat and see each other every once in a while too.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's been so cool to get you back on the podcast. The last time you were on was September 2022. So a few things have happened since then. So we'll get into those updates
Yeah.
and all this new stuff that I'm really excited that you're doing and everything. But let's go back in time a little bit and start with your story. Of course, people can listen to episode 88 if they want to hear more about that, but at least share like how what led you to say yes to Jesus, and then eventually after working as a teacher and a coach, what led you to say yes to student ministry?
So just in summary, because I think I talk about it more in depth in episode 88, but for me, I was raised in a home that always taught my parents did an amazing job teaching us like Bible stories and about Jesus. But I didn't really understand that it was about having a relationship with Jesus and it wasn't just about like knowing about Jesus. But my parents then sent me to a Christian leadership summer camp. It was a 2-week camp. I had never been part of like a youth ministry growing up. Like I knew about Jesus, would go to church with my family, but just it hadn't clicked fully yet for me. My faith wasn't my own. I knew about faith, but it wasn't my faith, if that makes sense. And my parents sent me to Colorado for 2 weeks to a Christian leadership camp. And it was the first time I'd ever been around people my age that were like loved Jesus, like sing worship songs, not just like hymns that in the faith tradition I grew up in.
Yeah.
And like they were interested in what they were talking about. And they seemed like I don't know, just like it was such an awakening for me. And there was a lot of great talks at that 2-week summer camp. But what was most powerful for me was seeing other people my age like love Jesus. And just outside of my family just hadn't witnessed that. And the second thing was there was a communicator who spoke in a way that made sense to me. And I've always been passionate about teaching. Like growing up, I never played baby Barbie wedding house. I played teacher, gave my neighbors homework, got mad when they didn't do it. Like I love good teaching. I always wanted to be a teacher. And so I felt like what this guy named Mark did was he just helped connect dots for me. Like the information that I had been taught in my childhood, he helped me connect it to like, well, it's not just about like this guy that lived 1,000 years ago. It's about, a relationship right now. And so it was my very first experience with the Holy Spirit. It was my first like time where I felt like I was placing my faith in Jesus and I felt Jesus's presence. And so that would be when I feel like my faith became my own. That's when I found Jesus. And then I feel like the next few years we're trying to figure out like how to follow Jesus, you know? What does that look like when you're playing Division 1 soccer and you're, sports really frames your whole life. And so that was really good. God put some really great people in my life because shortly after I graduated college, I moved to a new state and joined a Bible study because I didn't know how else to make friends, because I moved to a brand new area.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was the beginning of a journey. So, like, shout out to Amanda and James, Jason and Rachel, who all just like amazing, incredible Jesus followers who helped me figure out what does it look like, not just to know Jesus personally and have a relationship, but what does it look like to follow Jesus? And I was, a middle school teacher in the community and a high school girls soccer coach. So while I was doing that, I started volunteering in
Mm.
their youth ministries because they were both leading youth ministries. It was my first time in youth ministry. Actually, I would volunteer at events for Amanda's youth ministry, and then at Jason's, he's like, "Can you come teach the kids about sex?" And I was like, because I was the health teacher in the community, so that's why he was asking me that.
Mm.
And I was like, "Sure, like, why not?" And so that was kind of my entry into it. And I really loved it. And I just never knew what I was missing because growing up, I was the kid on the sports team, the basketball and soccer teams who was at a different tournament every weekend. And I was the one who probably frustrates all the listeners right now. And they're like, "We know all about you." That was me. And so I just never was part of something like that. And so as I started volunteering, I was like, man, this is so incredible. And for me, I had great coaches and great team members who were definitely like my support network. So it wasn't like I was missing that like faith component of someone my age
Mm.
pursuing a faith, but I wasn't missing the like friendships. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
like I just didn't know I was missing that. And my parents, they didn't grow up in a youth ministry, so they didn't know. And so I was volunteering in the youth ministry. And after I taught in the school system for 6 years and was volunteering, the church came to me and was like, "You really, we would love for you to come on staff." And it was like a whole journey. And I was like, "What do you mean? Like, I planned my whole life to be a school teacher. I have both degrees in education. Like, I'm good. I'll be the #1 volunteer for life." And anyways, God pursued me in that and just spoke like very clearly to me that you wanted me to use the gifts that he gave me to teach kids about the spiritual health that's eternal,
Mm.
not just the physical health that's just temporary.
Mm.
And I'm really grateful for that. And I was terrified because I loved my job. I loved teaching more my 6th year than I did my 1st year. And so it's not that I didn't think I would like youth ministry. I just really loved teaching.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I made the leap. Even like leaving something you love seems to be like a theme in my life. And like I see this over and over again because I feel like so often we hear people talk about leaving things they don't love
Yeah.
because they don't love it anymore or they're frustrated or they're not happy. And I'm like, well, what about when you have to leave something you really love?
Yeah.
Is that okay too? And so it's definitely been a theme. So if that's you out there, I feel like it takes even more faith to leave something you love deeply because you don't know what you're walking into. So walking away from something you love feels like riskier. So for me, yeah, that's how I got into youth ministry. And I did youth ministry for several years outside of Baltimore, Maryland, and then moved down to Atlanta, Georgia. I was doing youth ministry at church down here, and then transitioned to an organization that resources people who work with the next generation and led the whole middle school department there. You can hear more about that in episode 88, or we'll probably talk more about that shortly. And it was really cool because I got to pull from my years as a school teacher, my years as a youth pastor, and I still now, travel and speak, and I love it. I'm so passionate about that. I love discipleship, but I really love breaking content down important. Like we have the most important message on the planet. And I want to make sure that we're making it personal and relevant to 12-year-olds and 21-year-olds and 17-year-olds. And I'm just passionate about that because that is what got my attention when it came to faith.
That's so good. Yeah. And I think so often we see, right, that like God doesn't necessarily ask us to be comfortable. And I think that's what we want as humans. We want to be in those comfortable places. I'm used to this. I enjoy it. And yet so often throughout the Bible and throughout church history, we see God asking people to step out of those comfortable places into the unknown because he has something better for us.
Yep.
And yeah,
Mhm.
it takes a lot of faith to do that. So kudos to you for continuing to do that over and over, even though I know it's difficult.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, like literally, who can say I've never left a job I did not love
Mm.
deeply? Like that is so wild. And I'm saying like, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4 jobs that I have left. And I'm like, I loved that job. That was my dream job. I loved that job. I loved that job. Like it's so crazy to say that.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that that's been my journey.
Well, I know things have recently changed for you again, and you've done that. You made that step yet again. So I'm excited to talk about details about your new project. But in general, what does ministry look like these days? What led you to that specific change that you're doing now?
I really feel like spending a decade, investing in the, mission I was called to at Orange was just such a blessing for me. And I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it and met so many cool people. But as I was kind of thinking about what my next steps were, I really felt like I was starting to have to say no to a lot of things that I wanted to say yes
Mm.
to simply because I was carrying so much in that role. And I wanted to say yes when I was asked to speak places. And I was having to say no like 75% of the time. I wanted to say yes to collaborate on projects outside of the Orange bubble that I just wasn't able to
Mm.
because I was working full time for Orange. And so it was a great like timing for when I decided to exit. And I feel
Mm.
like I just wanted to be able to elevate middle school ministry or just reaching middle schoolers in general, whether it's in the church, the school, the home, the community, the sports team, whatever. I wanted to be able to elevate that bar, not just in the Orange bubble, but all across the world.
Mm.
I am so passionate about this. And I know that not a lot of people are waving this flag. And I totally understand that, but I feel called to that. I felt called to middle school before I ever felt called to ministry.
Mm.
And I wanted that to be true about my life. And so I took the leap again to walk away from a team I love so deeply and a job I really enjoyed to step into a season of like, okay, God, I'm being obedient. Like, show me what's next. And I've spent, time I'm doing a lot more traveling and speaking, and I'm getting to collaborate with so
Mm.
many different organizations, doing so many things. I have margin in my life to take calls with leaders more often and getting to make resources that I really believe in deeply and build a ministry that fits well. Like I have more autonomy for it to fit well into the kind of ministry lifestyle I'm building for myself and my future.
Mm.
So that's kind of what ministry is looking like. And I know
Yeah.
I just recently launched something called Make It Middle School. I'm so excited. And it's kind of like the umbrella brand, Make It Middle School. And it's where whatever it is and wherever you work, if you're trying to reach 10 to 14-year-olds, I would love to help you make it more middle school
Mm.
because not a lot of people set out to make graphics for 12-year-olds. Not a lot
Mm.
of people set out to communicate to 11-year-olds. It's something like a skill set you build in practice. There's just not a lot of people teaching you how to do that. You kind of have to get thrown in. A lot of people get thrown in. It's just the first ministry they're trusted with. And I'm like, whether you're coaching a 12-year-old soccer team or you are leading a youth ministry, you're a small group leader, or you're a middle school teacher brand new to the school system, or you're creating an event or a camp, whatever it is, Make It Middle School is going to be a brand that helps equip leaders trying to reach middle schoolers. And so there are three specific arms. The consulting arm, so like whether you're doing a research project or you're writing a devotional, if middle school is someone you're aiming for, I strongly encourage you to reach out to people who are trained in how to make sure it's going to reach middle schoolers. Like you probably have an incredible message and vision for what your project is. And I so often see that people with amazing intentions, because they don't take that step to make sure, but like, will this land with middle school?
Mm.
The middle schoolers just kind of get overlooked and they
Mm.
just kind of get bunched in. And so I'd love to see that change. The other thing is a community. And in that community is where we're doing coaching for communicators that communicate to middle schoolers, whether you're in the school system, in a combined environment, in a middle school specific environment. My heartbeat is like, not only is the design of your message important, but the delivery is just as important. So often I feel like people, they might use a curriculum and say, well, this doesn't work for my kids.
Mm.
And I'm like, a lot of times what it comes down to is like, well, it's because you're not delivering it in a way that engages middle schoolers. So no matter if the content's great or
Yeah.
it sucks, it's going to feel like no content works with your middle schoolers. So I wanted to create an avenue. It's kind of like the next stage of like the book that I wrote, communicating to middle schoolers. Okay, now that we know how to communicate to middle schoolers, like how do we coach people in
Mm.
those skills? So it's not just in theory, but it's actually in practice. And so this specific community, like you have an opportunity to upload videos of you teaching middle schoolers, and we coach you in front of everybody, which can be terrifying for some people, but the whole point of it is to cheer you on, not critique you and rip you apart. So we're creating a community of people where like you're going to get to learn very quickly and practice by watching everybody else communicate to middle schoolers. And we're focusing on one thing, like what you absolutely need to do again. You should repeat this every time you
Mm.
communicate to middle schoolers. And what's one thing you should focus on next time? All built around the framework called the feedback code, which is a framework we created on how to give feedback to communicators. And then the third arm of Make It Middle School is a curriculum specifically for middle schoolers. And we're not ready to unveil all of that yet, but we're talking about making it middle school at church, making it middle school at school, and making it middle school at home, making it middle school on your sports team, making it middle school. And it's like, what does it look like? All of these lanes, to be able to engage with God's word and equip the people, the leaders in their life that want to influence their faith walk. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm proud of it. It's been
Yeah.
such a heartbeat. It feels like all of the things I've poured my life to are converging into this baby called Make It Middle School. And I'm just so excited it's out in the wild.
Yeah.
And I just would love to invite everyone to be part of it.
Oh, yeah. I know when we chatted last year and you kind of gave me a little hint that, hey, this is coming. Yeah, that was the first thing that popped in my head was this totally makes sense for you because it really does seem like this coming together of a lot of things that you're passionate about and you have experience with and it's so needed. I think it, like you said, it's an area of adolescence that we often kind of overlook
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
we throw people into it and say good luck. And yet it's
Hmm.
also potentially, arguably, the most important part of adolescence and your development, and that phase is so incredibly important. So, before we jump into more of how churches can benefit, how leaders can benefit, I'd love to just kind of take a step back and just like what is it about middle school? Like what is it that makes it so special? Why are you so passionate about that specific area of adolescence?
Oh, I could do a whole hour on this,
Yeah.
Steve,
Yeah.
alone. I love this question. I mean, when I ask people to think back to their middle school experience, there's always a strong reaction to like what is a memory from middle school that comes to your mind as soon as I, ask about it. And really often it's either a very embarrassing thing, it's a wounding
Mm.
memory, it's just a hard season of life. It's also the season of life where they are developing and kind of trying to understand who they are, their identity, and that they matter, and their self-esteem, and that they belong. It's like such foundational human years.
Mm.
It is it feels like the core of everything that they're going to need to walk out their faith. So when I look at the age groups, like but my degrees are in education, I'm certified K through 12, and I picked 6th through 8th grade. And I really wanted the reason I did is like, I'm like, they're just so impressionable. And that feels like honestly, 13, seventh
Mm.
grade year right after Christmas is the
Mm.
turn the corner of their adolescence. And like to me, that area of life needs people who care about them so deeply, who believe in them so much, and who actually see them for who they are right now and what they can bring to the world. And I just feel like, man, that's worth investing my life in.
Mm.
Like, I think every age group is so important. So I don't know if I would say
Mhm.
it's the most important, but I would say it's possibly one of the most impressionable seasons of
Mm.
life. And they can walk out of that season believing that they are good, that God is good, that they matter, that they belong, that they are worthy, that they have a purpose. Like to me, I don't know of anything else I could give my life to
Mm,
than that.
that's so good.
Help me off
Yeah.
my soapbox, Steve. Help me off my soapbox.
No, I'm gonna jump right with you. It's so important, yeah, because I mean, and with us, both being in youth ministry for a long time, it there's so many things that happen in those middle school years that are so crucial. And we
Mhm.
know that, if we do hopefully set them up on a good path, man, the things that they learn, that the path that they get put on during those times can
Mhm.
be insurmountable. Like if we set
Yep.
them up well. And
Mhm.
everybody else, like you said, they're like, they're just middle schoolers. And potentially, maybe the church should probably not be just thinking, oh, they're just middle schoolers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would love to see that change in my lifetime.
Mm,
I would love to see a church that sees that age group, whether you call them junior high, middle school, preteen, whatever it is you call them, because I know that there's a whole debate about how that's all broken up. 10 to 14, like the ages of puberty, whatever that looks
mhm,
like. I just everybody knows they matter, but even I understand, I can't even imagine parenting them. They are wild and exhausting. And I feel so much empathy for parents who parent that age group, but I just would love to see the church rally around it in a way that is unique to the age group,
mm.
not just the way that they rally around everybody else and everything else in youth ministry.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's getting harder and harder because, middle schoolers today are dealing with so much more than middle schoolers 10, 20 years ago as well. And so
Mhm.
the pressures of life and everything are on them too. In the middle of everything they're going through developmentally, they've also got more and more pressures from outside on them too. And so it feels
Mhm.
like it's getting more and more and more important for us to really turn this page and focus on this. So I'm
Mhm.
excited for what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, and I think, like, the translation of that, the pressure that you're talking about, like, a 13-year-old is watching all kinds of influencers on their YouTube shorts or on their TikTok or whatever they're watching, or they're talking about it in their friend group, and it's so natural, and it's a natural part of development to look at something and want to be that. But these middle schoolers need people in their life who not just, engage in that type of a conversation, but say, "Oh, that's beautiful, but you know what? You have something beautiful in you."
Mhm.
Like, don't ever change that about you because that's unique to them, but look at what's unique to you,
Yeah.
to encourage their ability to look outward and look up to other people, but also have an adult in their life who sees them and pulls something out of them
Mm,
because they're going to feel so much worth when
mm.
that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked with several friends within the youth ministry world, and there is this collective belief I think that a lot of us have, maybe all of us have, that especially like the younger, I think we saw it in Gen Z, but I think we're seeing it even stronger. At least it seems like it in Gen Alpha as they're now entering into middle school years, that they really do this. There's deep desire to make a difference in the world. I think they're starting to
Mhm.
see that potential, but they need solid leaders to help them connect those dots, to help them realize, yes, you
Yeah.
actually do have that potential, and it's been placed there by the God of the universe who loves you and wants to use you in an amazing way. And if we can help them connect those dots, watch out, because the middle schoolers and younger could
Mhm.
potentially change the world.
I totally agree. I don't think that we should wait till high school to mobilize a kid to make a difference in the world. I do, though, want to acknowledge it takes a lot more effort to mobilize a middle schooler because it's not
Yeah.
like you can show up to a shelter like with a high schooler, you can show up to a shelter, a group of high schoolers and say, "Oh, we're gonna sweep the shelter and clean it." And they can, like normal humans, do that and they have like common sense. A middle schooler is going to take the broom and start swatting at the ball in the air and shatter the light thing. And they haven't
Uh,
even thought about the consequence of that. Like,
so
so
true.
it takes, like, you have to be so much more ahead of them that I can understand why people are like, I'm already maxed. Like, I have no other energy, people power, or anything
Yeah.
to help make this happen. And I would love for all of us, we're all smart. Like, let's all put our heads together and figure out how to do this because this generation is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I think one of the things you mentioned in your book, it's been a couple years since I read it, but I think it was even speaking to them to be able to account for the crazy things that middle schoolers are gonna do. Like, and I
Mhm.
think since then, I've been very cognizant of, okay, like, I'll plan a 15-minute talk for high schoolers, but I'm gonna plan probably a 7 or 8-minute talk for middle schoolers because I know
Mhm.
after telling the guy to get up off the ground and that one to stop running around and this one who's whatever, like it's going to be lengthened to about a 15-minute message. So just
Mhm.
kind of accounting for those nuances that are there with those students.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%. Man, I like the just that chaos alone. Oh my gosh, I was reminded of this week, just being baptized by fire when it comes to managing a room of middle schoolers. I was thinking back to my first year or second year of teaching. I'm in my early 20s, and I had a kid in my class who had Tourette's, but he had the verbal, like he would yell out the
Yeah.
vulgar things, but you weren't, as a teacher, allowed to address it or even act like you noticed it. So let me just remind you, I am the middle school health teacher. Okay. So I have 45 middle schoolers in a room. I am the only adult in the room. And I'm teaching a unit on sexual health.
Yeah.
And this kid is in the room, and he would yell everything in threes. And he started yelling, this is going to be this is good thing this is a youth ministry group, but he
Yeah.
started yelling, I have wet dreams, I have wet dreams, I have wet dreams. It was a sixth grade group, and I'm
No.
not, as a teacher, allowed to respond to it or react to it. I have to just act normal. Thank God the sixth graders, half of them in the room, didn't even know what he
Mm,
was talking about,
sure.
even though we were learning about that, which is why he was yelling it. They didn't understand what that meant. And so I had to just keep talking like this wasn't happening and not laugh and not like, and I'm like, I look back at that, I'm like, that was hard. Like,
Yeah.
what just happened? And I'm so glad they, tried to train us as teachers on how to navigate those situations and honor that kid and stuff. But man, was that hard,
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
love that you're thinking about how do I navigate that in the way that I am teaching students in my class.
Yeah. Well, I want everybody to check out what you're doing, but I was thinking, could you give us a little preview for us today? So maybe one or two different ways that you think, and like you said, everything needs to be contextualized. So my youth group, my middle schoolers are going to be different from someone else's middle schoolers, but maybe there's kind of one or two overarching tips for us to make it middle school in our churches.
Okay, this could also be the whole episode, but okay, the first two things that come to mind. One, I think, like, if you don't have a middle school specific environment, I understand it is hard. You need space, you need money, and you need people to do that. I hope you're aiming for that one day. I hope it's in your plan. But I would say the first thing is, even if you're in a combined environment, every meeting you have for programming, for your messages, for your events, are you planning in your meetings a time to talk about how do we make this matter for a sixth grader? How do we make sure we're thinking about the parents of a sixth grader who are just entering into the youth ministry space and are probably terrified that there's 18-year-olds in the room? What are we doing to think about the eighth graders in this, or the seventh graders? Like, I would say most youth workers, if they're being honest, every single one of them leans either high school or middle school. Maybe 95% would probably say high school. And I understand.
Mhm.
And I'm not mad about it. I understand it. I would love to see that change in my lifetime. But I would say, because you lean that way, you probably think that way when you're planning your programming, you're planning your communication, you're planning your events, just simply blocking out time. Okay, but how does this work for a sixth grader?
Mm.
Maybe talk to your small group leaders, talk to the parents of that age group to make sure you're even filtering through their lens. So that would be one way to make it middle school, is just to put them on the agenda.
Mm. Cool.
Just think about them, bare minimum there. And the other thing I would say is, this is another sneak peek for you, Steve. Thank you
Ooh.
so much for having me on. But this is before anybody else knows. But for Make It Middle School at Home, for example, a middle schooler doesn't necessarily know how to have a devotional time. But we as youth workers get mad when we're like, they're not reading their Bibles. They're not having a devotional time. And, or we get frustrated. And I'm like, okay, but have we taught them the skills of how to do that? Like, have we actually taught them how to have that? So for us, make it middle school at home, which might mean with a parent, might mean with a grandparent, it might mean with a coach or a mentor. It might mean the basketball team that's always at a tournament on the weekends. It just means outside of our programming. But I'm thinking, let's talk specifically with a parent. We're launching a whole strategy where you get a curriculum at home for the parent to do with
Mm,
their middle schooler. And in sixth grade, the parent should lead their middle schooler through it. In seventh grade, the middle schooler should lead their parent through it.
mm,
And then in eighth grade, they know how to do a quiet time.
mm,
And so what happens is you equip the parent to help have the information they need to dissect scripture and interact with scripture. And then in seventh grade, you empower that kid to lead their parent or their adult
mm,
through it with the information that they need, the context they need. And then in eighth grade, they're able to interact with scripture on their own. And even though we're only aiming for once a week, which I think is way more realistic, like let
mhm.
them live out their faith, go serve. Like you don't have to just sit and read the Bible, like go talk about it with your friends. You know, it doesn't have to just be one way,
Yeah.
but I think they're going to feel a lot more confident interacting with scripture and God's word if we would actually teach them, how do
Mm,
I break this down? How do I interact with this? And so I am so excited. Like that is a way you can make it middle school, is by like laying out the tracks for an entire strategy, not just of telling a parent what
mm,
we talked about, but inviting the parent in to actually interact with their kid's faith with them
mm,
and equip them in a way where they feel like they're actually going to win with their kid.
mm.
And I know for some families, they're like, my kid would never do that. I think it's why it's important to start in sixth grade. I think
Yeah.
if you start in sixth grade they're more likely to do it through eighth grade, and tell them the plan. And I think
Mm,
it works really well when you tell a kid, or you kind of, all the parents of your kid's small group, everybody's going to do it the same night. So every kid is doing this with their parent that same night at their own houses. It is so much more likely to go well because the kid doesn't feel like they're missing out on something else,
mm.
because everybody else is spending 30 minutes with their dad or their mom or their grandma or whoever doing this devotional.
That's so cool. I'm excited to see what you guys
I'm
put together. Yeah, this is exciting.
I'm so pumped about it. I don't, there's nothing else that exists out there like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And I think that it's about time we resource parents of middle schoolers with what they need to engage in those conversations.
Yeah. I think just hitting on that, the simple thing of what you said, clue the students in on what's coming from this is so important, because we've talked to so many parents that are trying to implement some sort of like family devotion. And when they get to a certain age, it's going to be really difficult, like you said, to do that. But what if that parent as a sixth grader said, here's the plan. We're going to do this for a year. Next year, you're going to be leading me. And we're going to set you up to be able to do this on your own. All of a sudden, now that middle schooler is going to feel empowered. They're like, oh, wait, I can lead. I can do this on my own. And it might help turn the page for them to go from reluctantly go to family devotions to now going, I am preparing for the future. This is why I'm doing this. That's so
Totally.
cool. That's so
Totally.
cool.
Yeah.
So Ashley, you've already shared a ton of wisdom and everything today. You have so much experience from all different aspects of student ministry. But before we close up, I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of maybe speak to the heart a little bit, or whatever encouragement maybe God is laying on your heart to share with the student ministry leaders who are joining us today.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I would say, I know your to-do list is long. And after listening to an episode like this, you could either feel excited about the idea of like the possibilities of what you could, implement to reach middle schoolers, or you might be in a place where you feel like, I'm exhausted. I have nothing left to give. I have no gas in the tank. Great idea, Ash, but I got nothing to give. So I totally understand that. And I would say, just in your busyness and in your exhaustion, take a minute to take care of yourself, because you matter as much as your ministry matters. And you will only be able to influence and impact in a healthy way, it's all equivalent to how healthy you are as a person. So I would just say, like, you matter. Figure out a way to make yourself a priority. One of the things for me, if somebody would have said that to me, I'd be like, okay, cool, but I don't know how to do that. Like, I still have all this stuff to do and I have a job. For me, one of the best things I did was learn from, like, Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith, I think her name is. Her book is called Sacred Rest, and she talks about 7 different types of rest.
Mm.
And I had no idea. I'm terrible at rest. I'm an Enneagram 3. Who needs to rest? Let's get things done. But I'm like, oh, that's because there's 7 different kinds of rest. There's creative rest,
Mm.
there's emotional rest, there's physical rest. And like every single person listening knows what it feels like. You might get 10 hours of sleep at night, you wake up and you're still totally exhausted. That's probably because it's not the kind of rest you need.
Mm.
So looking into what do I actually need right now, and becoming like used to being in tune with that, man, does that
Mm.
help you remain healthy in your role. And if you don't feel like you're in a position where you have the margin to do that, then maybe you shouldn't be there anymore. And
Mm.
then I'd also say don't be afraid to leave something you love,
Mm.
because there might be something that hangs in the balance that could be something you love even more.
Mm. That's so good. Ashley, it's been awesome to have you back today. It's always good to talk to you. I know people are going to want to connect more. They're going to want to learn more. They're going to want to check out Make It Middle School and book you to speak at their event and buy your book. And I definitely highly encourage you to check out Ashley's Instagram. She's been not only highlighting her own wisdom, but so much wisdom from other people that are in student ministry as well, that are just sharing their tips and their experiences from middle school ministry and beyond. So tell us all about that, but also make sure you include some information about your ministry there in Ethiopia with Carry 117.
Oh man. You want me to tell you about Carry 117 or
Yeah,
what?
yeah, yeah. Include that in there.
Ah,
Like I want people to know about that too. I mean, it's not
oh,
make it
thank
middle
you.
school, but people need to know about this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we started it 10 years ago. This past November was our 10th anniversary. And it's a family preservation, orphan prevention through women empowerment organization. So we hire at risk, we teach them a skill, and then we give them employment so they can send their own kids to school. And the heartbeat behind that is when I learned that 75% of the 7 million orphans had a living parent, but they just had no way to provide for their kid. So they selflessly have to give their kids up to authorities in hopes of a better future. I thought, holy cow, no woman should ever be put in a situation where they have to decide to give their child up because they love them that much. Like
Mm.
that, it, if they don't want to, like if they have no way to provide for them, I'm like, no one should ever. So let's, give them a skill. Let's give them a training. Let's give them official certificates from the Ethiopian Leather Institute. And so it's an incredible organization, and we're really excited because we're actually launching something new that I feel like a lot of churches could be part of. So we basically create bags, like backpacks and purses and wallets and things like that, export them around the world. But with my platform, I said, all these churches do these back to school drives. What if we doubled our impact in the
Hmm.
world and we made the book bags?
Hmm.
Instead of telling them to go buy book bags from Walmart or Amazon or Target, which are possibly supporting the very thing Christians say that they're against in the world, made in a factory with God knows what kind of principles. I'm like, we're a World Fair Trade certified organization, only 6 of them in Ethiopia. We literally could make the backpack probably for less than what you're buying it for. And you would double your impact. You would help a kid in need in your community
Hmm.
and keep a family together across the world. I'm like,
Mm.
to me, we're already doing this. Let's work smarter as
Yeah.
ministry leaders. Let's double our impact, man. And then you think about like, oh, okay. And then I can also bring teams and trips to serve there at the place that's making the backpacks for our church. Yeah, you can. And then it's like, oh, and then the ministry leaders from Ethiopia come on tour in the US so they could come to our youth group and talk. Yeah, they could. Like, there's a whole strategy that
Wow.
I'm trying to weave together for churches to do better work cross culturally. And that's such a simple way to invite
Mm.
people in because they're already doing the backpack drive. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, please reach out, because I think it could just be so impactful for us and for families across the
Yeah.
world. So
That's really cool. So where can people
yeah.
find out all that information about you, connect with you more?
Yeah. Okay, so you can go to carry117.com, or the handle is carry117, like Carry 117. For me, my handle is Ashley Marie Bohinc, get using my name. And Macon Middle School's also got a handle, maconmiddleschool.com website, ashleybohinc.com is my website. You can drop all these, Steve, in the show notes or whatever.
Yeah.
But I answer my DMs. So DM me or email me or whatever. I would love to be in touch.
Ashley, I'm so thankful for your friendship, but also the ways that we've been able to get to partner together, and the ways that you've helped make me better as a youth pastor as well. And just so grateful for all that you've done, and really excited about what is coming next, and just praying that God blesses it all.
Thank you, Steve. I'm honored to be part of this.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, there are two things that you can do. First, share this with someone else who serves in student ministry, or maybe someone who needs some guidance on how to make their church more middle school. And second, give us a positive rating on your podcast app. And if you can, leave a review. Both of these things help us to continue getting great guests like Ashley. And if you want to go beyond that and support my ministry with National Network of Youth Ministries, you can go to nnym.org/Steve Cullum, or just follow the links in the show notes, where you can learn more about joining my financial support team or my prayer support team. You can also book me to speak at your next event or training, and you can also learn more on how NNYM can help you thrive as a leader. Also, be sure to check out the show notes for all the links that Ashley mentioned, including all the ways to continue connecting with her. As I mentioned in the last episode, we're officially in the 10th year of this podcast, which still blows my mind. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. And I hope you'll be back for future episodes as well. If you can't wait a couple weeks, be sure to check out the archive. We have over 150 episodes that I'm sure will help you grow as a disciple and leader. And until next time, be sure to stay connected, and may God bless your ministry.